Hi, I'm Larry Richardson and welcome to Zeniers.com Cooking. This week we're going to make what I call a fajita burrito. It's a combination of the classic fajita, which is usually grilled meat, onions, and peppers, and a burrito, which is usually refried beans and grilled meat put into a flour tortilla. The way we're going to make it is extremely healthy, extremely nutritious, and very easy, and yet it comes out extremely tasty. So come on and make it with me. The classic fajita burrito, as I make it, involves some very basic ingredients. We have a little bit of canola oil over here, of which we're only going to use about 1 tablespoon. We have ground cumin, which is a very common ingredient in Mexican cooking. We have some salt. You can use a little bit of mojo if you want to buy it, but it's not required. We have the refried beans right here. We have flour tortillas. Get the flour, not corn. This is traditionally made with flour. We have green pepper. We have half a green pepper, half a sweet red pepper, a Vidalia onion. I really like these because they're sweet. A jalapeno, which is optional because it does make the dish very hot. So if you don't like heat and you don't like it spicy, do not add one of these. And we have 2 breasts of chicken. Now the chicken can come from just about any source. Just make sure it's pretty fresh and take it out of the packaging, give it a good rinsing, and then chop it up. Now when you cut the chicken, make sure to use a separate knife than the knife that you intend to use when you're going to cut the vegetables. We want to be really careful about cross-contamination. I also do not cut chicken on the same cutting board as I cut vegetables. So let's get started by chopping up the chicken. So there you have it. The chicken is all chopped up into morsels. I will take this knife and just put it aside so I don't accidentally use it when I'm making the vegetables, when I'm chopping them up. Now what we're going to do is put the stove, the large pan on the stove, we're going to put that about halfway to medium to preheat it, and then we'll start cooking the chicken. I didn't show you the exciting moment, but I did put the refried beans in a pan on the stove. I put those on at just short of medium to warm them up while everything else is cooking. Make sure to buy either vegetarian or fat-free refried beans. Take it easy on your heart. They taste just as good, and it's a great way to save on calories. And if you really want to spice them up, throw some chopped jalapeno in them ahead of time. So that's basically what I do with refried beans. I'm going to add a teaspoon of oil to the large frying pan to keep the chicken cooking. Let it move around, not stick to the pan. It also allows the chicken to get a little bit browned as we're cooking it. So now we'll put the chicken in the pan, and we're going to use a spatula that's specifically going to be used with the chicken. Now also with the chicken, I'm going to add about 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and I'm estimating it, but spread out about 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And let's start with 1/4 of a teaspoon of cumin. That's about a good point to start, and then if you decide a little bit later on you want it spicier, then you can just continue to sprinkle a little bit more on. But this is really where the flavor comes from for this recipe. It will give it that kind of green fajita flavor that is just so delicious. You will note that I did put on another rubber glove, and that's mainly because of the jalapeno. I have contact lenses. If your fingers come into contact with a jalapeno and you have to work with contact lenses, you are going to spend the rest of the night and probably tomorrow crying, because not only will it hurt when you take out the lenses, but when you put them back in tomorrow, they will still have residue on them. So make sure you use a glove if you're going to be touching your eyes for any reason. So the basic slice that we do with the peppers is a linear slice. So I'm going to clean this pepper out, take the stem off, get rid of all the seeds and any of the extra white parts that are sitting around. And then I'm going to cut it in strips. Anyone who's had a fajita knows that this is how you do it. So we go all the way around. And again, this knife is the knife that was not used to cut chicken. It is a clean knife just for the vegetables. I'm really careful about cross-contamination. So you can see that chop, and then I chop it this way and give it a little length. Now, some people would probably leave those peppers full in length. but I think it's easier to deal with them and easier to eat if you chop them up a little bit. So now we're going to stem the green pepper too. Get all the seeds out. Take out some of that extra white part. There we go. And the same thing. Going to cut it into strips. Now it looks to me like the pepper, this green pepper, is a little bit shorter, so I'll probably only cut these in half. So there's our peppers. Next we're going to do the onion. And again, I really like the sweet Vidalia onions. I find that they add a lot of flavor and enhance just about every dish you can imagine. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're worth it. And yellow onion will do just fine too. But again, this is just a matter of taste. Peel off all that paper. Now with the onion, I just slice it in half from the top to bottom, and then just go around like this. There's no perfect science to slicing. Don't be intimidated by it. I know some people think that you have to have things to within 1 millimeter, but you really don't. Cooking's supposed to be fun. There we go, that's all cut. Now we're taking on the jalapeno. Take the top stem off. Then I like to, cut it in half. And then take out the seeds. Now, a lot of the flavor in a jalapeno, a lot of the heat, actually doesn't come from the seeds, it comes from this white part. So if you want to mellow it out a little bit, cut that white part out. And then I'm going to rinse the seeds out of the middle. And for this, I cut it lengthwise first. And then I just chop it up. And you can leave the pieces as large as you want, but just remember, the bigger you make them, the hotter the bite. There we go. So that's the vegetables that we are going to use in our fajita burrito. Okay, and here's the chicken as it cooks. I did turn the temperature up to medium to speed it up now that I have the vegetables all chopped up. The refried beans are still simmering in their little pot, and the vegetables are waiting for their entry. Now this process of cooking the meat can take up to 15 minutes. You don't want to see any pink on them. You want to make sure they're really well cooked. Now as the meat starts to brown, I like to take the spatula and cut it in half, make it into even smaller morsels. It's very much easier to do as the meat starts to cook, and it also gives you a chance to look inside and make sure that everything is cooking well. Again, we do not want this meat pink at all. So the meat has been on for 15 minutes. It's looking very well cooked. I'm slicing it in half. It's breaking easily. I don't see any pink in the side. So I'm going to move the chicken meat over to the side and then add the vegetables to the pan. And you can see I'm not adding any more oil than the 1 teaspoon that we used at the beginning. You just don't need it. You don't need a lot of oil. And I try to leave it out of every cooking project that I do. So there we go. Now the vegetables are added. And we're going to saute those, which means get them to the point where they're just starting to turn clear. This is a dish where you want the vegetables to have a little bit of crunch, just a little bit. It'll make them taste a lot fresher, and it gives the meal a little bit more texture. Just to make it interesting and keep this a very flavorful dish, I am going to add another 1/4 teaspoon of cumin to the dish on the vegetable side. Again, you may want to add more and you may want to add less. You'll know better after the first time you make this. And make sure as the vegetables are sauteing that you also give the chicken a little bit of a stir so the pieces down at the bottom don't burn. While the chicken and vegetables are cooking, it's time to turn on a small frying pan and add a flour tortilla to it. Putting the flour tortilla over about halfway to medium heat will cause it to soften up a little bit, make it much more pliable, so when you add the chicken and vegetable mix and a little bit of beans, it will be a lot easier to roll it up. So you just pretty much set it in there like that, keeping an eye on it. You don't want it to cook to toast, and flipping it occasionally. So you want this to just be warmed up, very pliable, and that way you'll be able to work with the chicken and the vegetables a lot more easily. I can see that the onions and peppers are just starting to turn translucent, which is the point of sautéing them. So now I'm going to stir them in with the chicken, and that way the flavors will meld. And there you have it. The chicken fajita mix is done. I would say that this cooking process took probably about 20 to 25 minutes because the chicken took about 10 to 15 on its own, and then adding the vegetables at least took another 10. So that pretty much wraps up that part of it. I'm going to turn the power off on the chicken and pepper mix. There we go. And I'll turn it off on the beans and on the tortillas. So now we're going to assemble the basic fajita burrito. The first thing we do is pick up the tortilla in tongs. It should be pretty hot at this point, so doing it with your fingers is probably going to hurt. So pick it up with tongs, drop it on your plate. After that, you're going to take a scoop of the onion and pepper and chicken mix and put it on your tortilla, trying to get a mixture of peppers and onions and just the right amount of chicken. And again, if you want to, you can cut the vegetables a little finer. They might be a little bit easier to deal with, but I do like them crunchy, to have a touch of that crunch. And the last thing I'm going to do is add some of the refried beans. Now, if you want to, you can have the refried beans on the side, but in true fajita burrito style, I like to put it on the tortilla. And there you have it. Now you just fold it up almost taco style. If you have the larger tortillas, you can actually make it true burrito style and put it into a well-wrapped package. But in this case I have the smaller tortillas, so I'm going to do it like this. So that's what it looks like. Very basic. You can have chips and salsa on the side. Again, you can have your refrieds on the side. My main recommendation is this is supposed to be a healthy, low-fat meal. So whatever you buy, if you get the chips, get the baked chips. Just try to keep that down, and also keep an eye on the sodium. You notice I did not add a lot of salt to this dish, and I also think that it's a good idea if you are going to salt it more than I've salted it for cooking purposes, add the salt after you're done and do it per serving. That way you can keep a really good control over your salt intake. So there we have it. Now you know how to make a very basic fajita burrito that's delicious, nutritious, and really not that complicated to make. I pretty much believe anyone can make this dish. There are a couple of other things I just wanted to point out. If you want to add a hot sauce to it, and again, taste it first to make sure that jalapeno isn't too hot. I prefer a green hot sauce on it that's made out of jalapenos. It's just a much greener taste than the red hot sauces have. And also, I did not use this in the cooking today, but you can also use a mojo sauce instead of adding the cumin. That way you'll have plenty of flavor and but you'll have a little bit less control over the sodium that's in the dish. But you may want to consider adding this at some point. You may even want to just experiment with it. So thank you again. My name's Larry Richardson. Please join me on Zenius.com and let me know what you think of this recipe.